We are anonymous. We do not serve kings. We do not worship false idols. And we do not look away when power stumbles in plain sight. Your support makes it possible to cut through the noise and hold the line when the headlines try to gaslight you. Start with the emotional engine of this moment, because that is where the stakes are clearest. After a night of brutal humiliations and election losses across the country, Donald Trump woke up and made everything worse. That is not an opinion. That is a sequence of choices that any viewer can track. First, he fired off unhinged tweets that sprayed friendly fire at his own side. Then he escalated to attacking Republican senators directly to their faces. And then the main event. He walked into a room of business leaders in Miami and tried to give a speech. We use the word tried on purpose. What followed was not leadership. It was not even persuasion. It was a cascade of verbal stumbles, fact-free bravado, and a public unraveling that left the room mostly silent. If you have been wondering whether the talk about Donald Trump's cognitive decline was exaggerated, he just delivered the most convincing evidence yet that it is not. Watch how the pattern unfolds. Instead of focusing on the economy these executives live and breathe, Donald Trump opened by attacking Barack Obama. He did the routine we have all heard 100 times. He insisted he is not a mean person and cast Obama as the divider. He dropped the middle name like a tell. Then he tried to score a cheap point by mocking the Obama Presidential Center, fixating on cost overruns, and warning that the site choice was poor because, in his words, Obama does not know about location. It was a strange pivot in a room where people expect numbers, not nicknames. The Obama Center's delays and cost swings are public record, but dragging them into a business forum as a replacement for any coherent economic plan did not reassure anyone. It reminded the room that Donald Trump's default move in moments of pressure is not policy. It is grievance. From there, he lurched at Gavin Newsom. Not the argument, not the map, not the data, just the sneer. Slimy Newsom, slimy Newcomb. That is what he brought to a moment when the scoreboard is moving. Millions of votes worth of map changes are in motion, reforms that undercut the gerrymander advantage his party has leaned on for years. Voters in California approved a measure that changes how lines can be drawn going forward, and other blue states are looking at their own steps in the same direction. Maryland, Virginia, Illinois, New York. That matters because House control has been living on a knife edge, and a handful of fairer maps could flip margins that have been weaponized by extreme partisans. When the ground beneath you shifts, serious leaders talk about recalibration. Donald Trump tossed a nickname and tried to bluff past the scoreboard. The room noticed, cornered Donald Trump, then pulled the oldest card in his deck. He sold a fantasy about mandate and momentum. He declared the biggest vote in history and the best 9 months of any president. He said that if he can get a few more 9-month stretches like this, everyone will be very satisfied. But the point of leadership is to ground rhetoric in facts. And at that very moment, the quiet in that room told you the facts were not cooperating. Executives are not impressed by cheerleading without a ledger. They watch input costs. They watch labor markets. They watch interest rates and supply chain pressures and policy timelines. They can tell when a speaker is padding the numbers. They can tell when a speaker is hoping applause will fill the space where the data should be. Then came the moment that stopped the room. Donald Trump was trying to celebrate Miami as a haven for people fleeing communist tyranny. He meant to say South America. He said South Africa. Then rather than correct himself and move on, he locked into the mistake and wandered deeper, riffing about a G20 gathering in South Africa that he says he will not attend, and insisting South Africa should not be in the Gs at all. The words sloshed from one thought to another. It sounded like someone trying to bulldoze through a wrong turn by stomping on the gas. You could feel the discomfort in the pause after each sentence. The South America. South Africa confusion was not some trivia slip. It was a microcosm of a larger decline. Precision matters when you talk about trade alliances and economic forums. Precision matters when markets hang on phrasing. If you cannot keep your continent straight, the people who deploy capital will not keep their confidence steady. Layer that on top of the greatest hits of bluster and you see the whole picture. Donald Trump did the thing where he claims the Inflation Reduction Act was one of the greatest scams and that it caused massive inflation. He did not reconcile how tariffs, which are taxes on imports, raise input costs that ripple across supply chains and into the prices families pay. He did not reconcile why grocery bills rose faster in periods of tariff escalation. He did not reconcile that energy price swings, pandemic shocks, and corporate margin behavior are complex and cannot be yelled away. He just shouted scam and moved on. People who shop every week do not need a speech to tell them what price pain feels like. They need to hear what a leader will do about it without lighting more fires. Then he crowed about not using AutoPen in his administration. No AutoPen, he said, as if the choice of a signature device were a proof of authenticity that erases contradictory public statements and muddled accounts around pardons and paperwork. The irony, of course, is that the AutoPen boast came wrapped in a morning where his talking points changed from clip to clip and where his surrogates had to scramble again to explain away the gaps. This is what happens when a story is always rewritten to fit the immediate need. The facts become prop furniture. The line is whatever covers the next 10 minutes. And yes, he said the thing about lifting more than 600,000 Americans off food stamps in 9 months and about 1.9 million more American-born workers being employed than when he took office. Set aside the selective framing for a moment. Ask the better question. Are we celebrating the government making it harder to access food assistance for families that qualify during periods of price stress? Are we congratulating ourselves for shrinking the safety net in an economy where low-wage hours can vanish without warning? If you are speaking to a room full of billionaires, the optics of bragging that you cut people off SNAP will be noticed. Not because the executives are defenders of every program, but because they understand the basic math of social stability. If your workforce cannot afford the basics, you will pay the costs in another way. If your community cannot keep food on the table, you will pay the costs downstream. That is why economists talk about automatic stabilizers. That is why smart policy is not a scoreboard of how many people were removed from a benefit. It is a strategy for how many people stopped needing it because wages rose and costs fell. In moments like this, the names matter because names show the structure of power. If we are going to talk about moochers, say the names that live on the subsidy side of the ledger. Jeff Bezos, who built a logistics empire that still leans on public infrastructure and tax engineering. Elon Musk, whose companies ride waves of public contracts and credits. Mark Zuckerberg, whose platforms monetize attention while the rest of us pay the social cost. Larry Ellison, whose fortune sits on top of layers of federal spending in defense and enterprise systems. The Walton family, whose retail dominance suppresses wages in a way that pushes workers onto public support, effectively turning subsidized low wages into a competitive edge. These are not wicked fairy tales. They are business models stabilized by public money, public rules, and public risk. Pull back and you see why the political context is making Donald Trump lash out at his own side. The election map that turned against him last night is not just a blue wave headline. It is a set of signals that suburban voters, young voters, and a significant slice of independents are tired of performative extremism. They are tired of shutdown theater. They are tired of drama that does not fix anything. They want functional government and time back. They want a break from the constant cortisol spike of crisis. When you deliver performative conflict instead of problem-solving, the swing voters respond by punishing you. That is what Mike Johnson was hinting at when he warned that liberals and Democrats would blow up the term. Translation: if we keep running the same playbook of escalations and stunts, the voters will finish the job that started last night. And that brings us to the pressure cooker inside Trump world. Carolyn Levitt becomes the face on cable who has to defend the indefensible. Stephen Miller becomes the ghostwriter of the next wedge that keeps the base simmering. Russ Vought becomes the budget-side narrative crafter who tells you the numbers say what they do not. They are the ones who patch over the morning damage and push new lines by afternoon. But even the best spin shops cannot hide the lurches forever. When a leader is losing the ability to carry a room without nicknames, when a stem-winding monologue devolves into South Africa G-talk, when AutoPen boasts are supposed to distract from economic incoherence, even your friends begin to look for exits. There is also a moral layer here that a lot of punditry skips, because it is easier to talk about tactics. It matters that the default attack line goes back to Barack Obama every time Donald Trump feels cornered. It matters because it tells you who lives rent-free in his head and what kind of energy he wants to pump into the room. He reaches for division because division is the only tool he trusts. It is the move that crowds out accountability. If we are busy fighting over the library, we are not counting the costs of tariffs. If we are busy arguing over the museum location, we are not tracking the price of eggs. This is how you keep your base energized when the governance record is thin. You sell constant grievance as a substitute for results. And when the grievance machine sputters, you pivot to culture war. You announce that woke is back like a cartoon line and try to reboot the season. But voters evolve. The culture war does not reduce the rent. It does not stop a shutdown. It does not lower the price of gas or groceries. This is why the business room did not leap to its feet. These people have their own beliefs. Many of them have backed Donald Trump with checks and access, but they have spreadsheets and quarterly calls. They do not have patience for a man who cannot hold a straight line through a paragraph about hemispheres. They are watching a portfolio asset lose coherence in public, and when that happens, they move on. There is a strategic lesson for everyone who wants accountability to keep winning. Keep the coalition disciplined. Keep the message tight. When Donald Trump sells fantasy about the best 9 months, bring the data and the lived experience. When he says tariffs beat inflation, explain the pass-through from import taxes to shelf prices. When he brags about shrinking SNAP rolls, explain the mechanics of administrative barriers and the reality of wage stagnation. When he flails at Obama's library, remind people that the cost of a museum is not a substitute for a plan to lower housing costs or to fix childcare deserts. When he sneers at Newsom, put the map on the screen and show how redistricting reforms rebalance representation. When he says no auto pen, remember that a pen is not a policy, a signature is not a strategy. And keep noticing the silences, because the silences tell you where the truth leaks out. The quiet in that Miami room said more than any applause line. It said the people who usually clap decided to wait. It said the thread of credibility snapped when he committed to the wrong continent and tried to overpower the mistake with volume. It said the business class will still cash a tax cut, but they will not buy a product that breaks down in front of them. Silence is the sound of early exits. There is one more piece of the story that matters for the next stretch. Every time Donald Trump stumbles, the temptation among opponents is to declare the saga over. Do not do that. Decline can produce irrational choices. People who feel cornered will test boundaries, double down on attacks, and punish internal dissent. That is why you saw him lashing out at Republican senators in the morning. It is easier to blame your allies for not clapping loud enough than to fix your own delivery. It is easier to call the press unfair than to make the numbers add up. Expect more of that. Expect more tests of limits. Expect more efforts to shove agencies into the culture war to keep the base hot when the markets turn cold. So what now? Now you do the ordinary work that wins extraordinary outcomes. You organize. You register. You talk to people who are sick of the circus and remind them they are not alone. You support independent media that will not look away when the cable narrative wants a new horse race. You document every policy that aims down instead of up, and you explain it in language that people who are not obsessed with politics can feel. You take the energy from nights like the one we just had, and you turn it into weeks of steady pressure, because the reason Donald Trump spiraled this morning is that he felt the pressure working. He felt the public beginning to reframe his brand. He felt the business class taking a half step back. He felt the coalition that defeated him in the mid-cycle beginning to harden into something bigger than a one-night surge. We are anonymous, and we will say it plainly. Donald Trump told a room that South Africa should not be in the G's after accidentally swapping it with South America, bragged about the best 9 months without naming the metric, declared no auto pen while swimming in mixed messages, and tried to turn a presidential library into an economic plan. He used nicknames on Gavin Newsom while the map moved under him. He waved away food assistance cutoffs as a triumph while speaking to people whose businesses rely on customers with money in their pockets. He called for facts and then ran from them. The pattern is not subtle. It is a man aging in public, a team straining to keep the frame in focus, and a country that is relearning what it looks like when the lights are on and the tricks stop working. If you believe in calling things by their names, help us keep doing this. Like the video now. Subscribe if you are new. Drop a blue heart in the comments so we know who stood watch with us to the end. Share this with one person who is tired of the drama and wants clarity they can use. Keep your head clear and your standards high. Do not let anyone tell you a stumble is a stride, or that a nickname is a plan, or that a quiet room is applause. Do not forget the sequence that brought us here. The humiliations at the ballot box, the morning meltdown, the attack on Republican senators, the business speech that became a cautionary tale, the South America and South Africa confusion, the G20 line, the autopen boast, the SNAP brag, the Inflation Reduction Act spin, the constant return to Barack Obama when the numbers run out, the Gavin Newsom nicknames when the map shifts, the silence when the reality sets in. Stay focused because focus is how we win. Keep organizing because organizing is how we turn one night into a season. Keep telling the truth because truth is how you break the trance of spectacle. We are anonymous. We see the pattern. We will not look away. And if you are with us, say it with a click, a share, and a blue heart, then go talk to someone who needs the map more than the meme.